Manborg. Phil, I think everybody should just go see this trailer right now of Manborg because it might even eclipse Chris Nolan's Batman trilogy. What do you think?
Clearly it does because it's both a man and a cyborg in one.
What?
And that just makes it the best.
Can you also add the fact of the overdubbing? Huh?
Yeah,
The whole typical Japanese.
I am all for unnecessary dubbing. That's what made a handful of dollars so good.
I think if Manborg took on Batman, America wins. The United States wins. The world wins.
Easily. Even though it seemed like it was an Australian movie.
Right, exactly. But I don't think people here are tuning in to this Crossover Chronicles podcast, episode number 2, to hear about the epicness that is Manborg. By the way, again, please YouTube the trailer. It is the best thing you'll ever see in the world, ladies and gentlemen. But they're here to talk about NBA playoffs, which kicked off, yesterday by the time you're listening to this show. It was pretty much an exciting series all throughout, except for one, which I'll talk about in a while. But nonetheless, a lot of storylines heading into for day one of the NBA playoffs. So before we kick that off, I am joined by Philip Rossman-Reich of Crossover Chronicles. And of course, I am your host, Jeff Garcia, also of Crossover Chronicles, and also Project Spurs. And of course, Phil is with OMD, Orlando Magic Daily. Phil, let's just get this series out of the way first. Chicago versus Brooklyn. You know what? In the last episode, I was picking Chicago just because of their vaunted defense. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, that vaunted defense gave up 106 points. And looked very lifeless. And it also gave up 60% shooting to Brooklyn in the first half, ladies and gentlemen. The final score from Brooklyn, 106-89. Yes, the Brooklyn Nets just totally crushed the Derrick Rose-led Chicago Bulls. How bad was it? Let's just say, going into halftime, Chicago only was able to muster. Oh my! I can't believe can you believe the halftime scoring for them? Look, 14 points in the first quarter, 21 points in the second quarter for Chicago. Brooklyn, 25 points in the first quarter, 35 points in the second quarter. Yeah, Brooklyn scored as many points in the second quarter as Chicago did in the entire first half. That's not a recipe for winning playoff basketball.
Yeah, this was a laugher since right from the get-go. The Nets, they were just white hot. They shot, at least early on in the game, 56%, and putting 6 players in double figures. You know what? We can go on and on about the stats, but at the end of the day, Chicago just laid an egg.
Oh yeah. I mean, Brooklyn was ready to play, and the crowd was incredible there. You could tell those fans were.
Oh my God! What did you think of the blackout?
You know what? I'm all for marketing gimmicks. You know, and at this stage, it's the first playoff game. You know, everyone is excited, and you could really tell that those fans in Brooklyn have been waiting. What is it, like almost 60 years now for postseason professional sports to return?
Right, exactly. You know, heading into this series, again, why I picked Chicago to come out on top, you have to go back to the regular season. You know, the Chicago won 3 of the 4 regular season meetings this past regular season, and they are holding the Nets to 87 points per game. But Brooklyn, they had 89 after the third quarter of this game 1. As they say, things change in the postseason. They certainly did. Brooklyn flipped the script on Chicago. They held the defense on them. They were hyped. They looked like they wanted this game 1 more so than Chicago, obviously. But if there's anything to take away, there's got to be something that Chicago can leave game 1 and take it to game 2 somewhat positive, or this is just an embarrassment?
Well, I mean, the one thing that they can positively take to game 2 is that this is just one game. Brooklyn doesn't get 2 wins for this one game.
Okay, but statistically, 76% of the times that whoever wins game 1 goes on and wins the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible, but they're definitely behind the 8 ball. They know that they have to win 1 game in Brooklyn to win this series, and I would bet, you know, you're not going to shoot 56% against the Bulls defense in 2 games, in an entire series. So, you know, the effort wasn't there, and that's something that Chicago's going to have to address. But I don't see Brooklyn having a performance this good again. Now, whether Chicago can muster up the offense to to keep up with Brooklyn the rest of the series is a completely different deal.
Should Joakim Noah should not have played. He definitely did not look the Noah of what we know, that energy guy, that high energy, that roughness, that in the paint defender. He played despite foot pain. I think he had plantar fasciitis. He looked clearly limited.
Yeah, I don't think Noah should have played. I think it threw them off rhythm, and it allowed Lopez and Evans to really just wreak havoc in the paint.
They played him more than 14 minutes.
I mean, I think they started him just to see what he could give them, and I mean, he seemed to have some energy early on, but you could tell that the pain was getting to him a little bit, and that his effectiveness was really limited once he got tired, once the adrenaline kind of wore off, and that's when Brooklyn pulled away.
Crazy question.
Crazy answer.
If Chicago goes down 2-0 heading back to Chicago, does that mean Derrick Rose may come back?
I think Thibodeau came out before the game and said that it's not looking likely that Rose is going to play at all this postseason. But if they go down 2-0, I would almost say that's less of a reason to put Rose out there.
Right, might as well throw somebody out there.
I mean,
all right, but you know what?
Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead.
If you're down 0-2 and it's not looking like you're going to win the series, why risk the injury? You've invested a significant amount of money in Rose. You've kept him out this season to make sure that he doesn't get hurt further. Why risk it?
Right, exactly. You know what? At the end of the day, Chicago just looked listless. They looked like they did not want this game. They just came out flat, and the box score shows it. But, you know, credit Brooklyn. They did exactly what they should have done. Brought the defense check. Had Deron Williams play like the Deron Williams you know. He had been kind of up and down throughout the season. He finished tonight with 22 points and I believe 7 assists. You also got to look at a guy like Brook Lopez. He looked very, very physical underneath. He was taking it to Joakim Noah. Any other big man they threw at him, he was playing like, in my opinion, one of the most underrated big men in the league right now.
Oh, and they were talking about it during the broadcast about how he's probably the best offensive post player, at least at center, or if not behind Pau Gasol as far as skill set in the league. I mean, I know that's ESPN boisterousness as usual, but it was still, it was still a very impressive game by Lopez. He's shown a lot of growth this year, and that's good to hear. That's good to see.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Brooklyn. What more can you say? They nailed the shots. They protected home court. They are up 1-0. They gave the fans exactly what they needed, a win. It's been a long time since Brooklyn had that or the Nets had that. They look really good. Is there anything else that also stood out for you from the Nets? Was it just their focus? Or I guess at the end of the day, the question is, was this really a Nets win or this really a Bulls loss? You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, I think, at this point. I want to see what happens when they go up against a more focused Chicago team. They kind of stepped on their throats early and didn't relent. And that's a good sign to see from Brooklyn because they've been, as you said, up and down all season. And so
right.
Again, the question's going to be, got to do it again, game 2.
Right, yeah. And look, no team is going to be shooting white hot the way Brooklyn was. I mean, this is just their night and they did it. If they do it, okay, great. Then they stand corrected. But Chicago, like Phil says, this is just game 1. But if anything, if I'm looking at Chicago right now, I'm kind of looking at Luol Deng right now. I really am. 3 for 11 from the field, 0 for 2 from downtown, 0 for 3 from the free throw line, and it was 6 points.
I mean, the problem I think with Luol Deng is that you get those performances from him. He's not. I mean, Chicago's offense is inconsistent to begin with. And they look worse when the defense doesn't show up the way that everyone knows it's capable of showing up. But, I mean, Luol Deng is a very skilled player. He's got the talent. He just doesn't have that spark. That's all I can. That's all I can say about him.
Do you sit Noah in game 2?
I see how he does in practice tomorrow.
All right. Well, there you go. All right. Once again, the final from Brooklyn, 106-89. The Brooklyn Nets go up 1-0 in the series. And again, Chicago's got to bring it or they're going to have a very early vacation. But you know what? As we transition to the next series, this was probably the only one that was a laugher today. I mean, everything else was pretty much really exciting. But I think you and I, Phil, were talking about this, before the game. We're like, well, this is going to be a very thrilling game. So we ended up we're very right. But let's go ahead and start off, let's go and shift now to the, series that kicked everything off, and that was Boston versus New York. It was a very, emotional night, especially for the Celtics, after the namesake city, suffered the tragedy. And it was very classy to see Melo, address the Knicks fandom, and of course Paul Pierce at the beginning of the game, pass their respects on to those who passed away in the tragedy. So classy move by the Knicks and the city of New York.
Yeah, I think it was President Obama who said it. The rivalry between New York and Boston is a sibling rivalry, and I think throughout this week that's been proven to be true. That there's a ton of love between New York and Boston, and New Yorkers understand what Boston, to major extent, what Boston is going through as a city right now.
Right.
And so.
Right. But
so we're all we're all kind of leaning on each other, which is great to see.
No, right, exactly. But once that ball went up in the air and tipped off the game, boy, did the Knicks fans remind the Celtics fans of the Celtic players that, this is still a game and let's go. There were the cascade of boos every time Paul Pierce grabbed the ball. It was right back to normal after the pleasantries were exchanged. So, you gotta love that. And a much needed distraction for the city of Boston. And, of course, for the players too that are carrying a lot of emotional baggage into this game. But enough about that. Let's go and dive deep into this game. You were talking about this in the last show, that Melo had to show up. This was going to be like maybe his coming out party. Can he be the guy? Can he be the man to lead a team beyond the first round and maybe even to the finals? How did you think about his performance today?
I think he did what he's good at. He scored. He had, I think it was 19 points in the first half, really set the tone for New York. Offensively, and then added 17 more to get his 36. He played some pretty solid defense throughout the night. He was just on fire at the beginning of the game, especially. Really helped.
Oh my God, yeah, he scored 10. Yeah, he scored the first 10 points for New York.
Yeah,
I think it was really, Melo versus Boston to begin the game.
And that's something Carmelo Anthony can do. But again, you look at his stat sheet, 13 for 29. That's not really very efficient. He did go 4 for 6 from beyond the arc, got to the line for 6 free throws. But at the same time, right, you scan across the box score a little bit more, you see 1 assist. Granted that assist came on a gorgeous pass, on a gorgeous read on a pick and roll
right,
with Kenyon Martin late in the fourth quarter that helped seal the game for New York. And then you go to the plus minus, and you take plus minus stats in an individual game with a grain of salt. He was the only starter with a negative plus minus. He was -3 on the day.
Yeah, exactly. And credit Melo. Yes, maybe he had a flurry to begin with, but he finished strong. It's just those lulls. If I'm in New York, I get worried during those lulls that Anthony has, because where are your points coming from?
Yeah, and I don't think Boston's going to turn the ball over 21 times every game this series. And there were some weird plays in that fourth quarter. They had, I think, 8 turnovers in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. The turnovers, as Phil mentioned, 21 turnovers?
21 turnovers.
Points. Yeah, 21 turnovers that led to 20 points for New York. Okay? And if that wasn't bad enough, you would think like a veteran player such as Jason Terry coming off your bench is going to be a spark. He fills it out. He was over for the game. You know what? This is a situation where Boston they could have I think they could have won this game if I just think they shot themselves in the foot.
Oh, definitely they did. This was a back and forth game. It was very, very tight. It was played, I think, at Boston's pace. They were able to get defensive stops for the most part. But then at fourth quarter, they couldn't hit a shot to save their lives. I think they were 8 for 25 or something like that, or not even 4 for they only scored 8 points. They had as many turnovers in the fourth quarter as they had points. That's not going to win ball games.
And you're Boston. You opened the 3 lead. The Boston had a legitimate shot of escaping New York, getting the one that they need on the road. But this just goes back to them. I think the loss of Rondo is going to hurt them in the long run. I think that Jason Terry has to be the Jason Terry that we know that he can be, like he was in Dallas. This is a team that has the pieces. Yes, maybe they're missing a big piece right now with Rondo, but against this Knicks team, they legitimately have a shot to upset them.
Yeah. Do you when you look at that box score, you see the Celtics bench players were 0 for 7 on the day on field goals. Do you think Boston's bench is going to be what holds them back here?
Yes and no. I think that will hold them back, because, and then I say no, because then you look at just when they're on the court, it doesn't matter if there's a bench player or a starter out there, you still got that sloppy play. I think this is just more of a mental thing right now for this team. Look at the fourth quarter. Boston only managed to muster 8 points in the defining fourth quarter. This is, I think it's just all up in their head. I don't know if it's fatigue. I don't know if they really, really are missing Rondo right now, but they have the pieces. I'm not going to solely put the blame on the bench. I just think collectively as a team, you can't turn the ball over as much as they did. You can't have a bench player, a veteran NBA player, a proven scorer, a former sixth man of the year, go scoreless off the bench. You just can't do that. And of course, and if I'm Doc Rivers, I'm thinking game 2, why don't we just let Anthony score 36 more points if you want? Look what happened. You look at a guy like, J.R. Smith. He scored 15 points. Raymond Felton, 13 points. Kmart finished with 10 points and 9 rebounds in huge minutes. Those little players like that is what's going to get Boston. You flip the script. Look at Jeff Green. He had a phenomenal game, 26 points. Paul Pierce, 21 points. I think Boston, if they just control the pace, watch the turnovers, they might get game 2. And I think of the team like with Doc Rivers and KG and Paul Pierce, this is not going to happen again in game 2.
Yeah, I can't see them turning the ball over. Here's the question for you then. And I think this has been a problem throughout some of their games, should Boston be turning kind of control over the game over to Jeff Green more and a little bit away from Paul Pierce?
You know what? I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think Jeff Green has proven this year that, he can be a reliable scorer. He can be a go-to guy. He was picking apart the Knicks defense throughout the entire game. So why not? Yeah, I say run it out there. And what's wrong with, and if Pierce really wants to see this team succeed, he would maybe have to learn to take a secondary role to Jeff Green. And why not? If Jeff Green can do this damage and not being the secondary, not being the primary guy, imagine if he is the primary guy. He becomes he's now a legitimate threat. I think New York knows that now. They're going to focus on him a little bit more in game 2. So the adjustments begin. And if you're in New York, that's your first adjustment. Don't let Green get hot again.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And Boston has the weapons. And I say that, and it's not like Jeff Green didn't get the ball. He took 15 shots and had 7 free throws and got to the line for 7 free throws. But I hate ever counting Boston out because every time I've done that, they've stormed back and, looked like Boston again. But
yeah. I mean,
it's feeling like the transition's going to come.
Yeah, you look at the end of the first quarter. That's your perfect example right now. Yeah. Just exactly what Phil was talking about. After they were getting pretty much punched left and right across the face, they regrouped fast and they rallied to take a 29-26 lead off. Guess who? Jeff Green's 3-pointer, just as the first quarter ended. So this Boston team, they remind me of Rocky Balboa. They'll take the punches, they'll do the rope-a-dope, they'll take the hits, but the moment you let up, they're going to swing and they're going to clock you. And that's why I can't count out this team right now with Doc Rivers, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. You can't. You just can't. Now, my question is this, Phil: is this a totally entire different series if Rondo is playing and he's healthy?
I think it definitely could be because at the end of the game they were running a lot of their offense through Paul Pierce, and And Avery Bradley isn't a true point guard. He's definitely more of a shooting guard, kind of in a point guard's body, and so he's had to kind of fill in that role. And so I think that it definitely would have helped the Celtics, especially down the stretch, to have a guy like Rajon Rondo who could create and make plays.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And again, as Phil mentioned, 4 points off the bench for the Celtics.
Yeah. No field goals.
No field goal, all by Courtney Lee, who got him off free throws. So that's a concern there. So for the Celtics for game 2, obviously you need more bench production, control the ball, don't be sloppy with it, and maybe, just maybe, have Jeff Green become more of a primary option over a guy like Paul Pierce or Kevin Garnett. Because Green clearly showed, he can play, and he definitely brought it onto the New York Knicks. As for the Knicks, though, credit them. They did a phenomenal. I mean, obviously, maybe credit them should be more credit Anthony, who had 36 points. He pretty much saved them. But I want to talk about one thing that is kind of concerning for me for the New York Knicks, as I don't know how much longer they can play with Shumpert and not start doing the kid and play dance. Because that guy's high top fade is pretty sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, yes it is. Yes it is. The high top fade is back. Because you got Nerlens Noel, he rocks the fade as well.
But seriously, aside from his epic fade, Shumpert, he's got to do a little bit more, in my opinion. I think he ended the game with 3 points, but is it just me or he just loves chucking it?
I mean, I think Shumpert. I kind of have a weird relationship with Iman Shumpert because I follow the Northwestern rule, where if Northwestern can beat you, you're probably not that good. And his senior year, or his last year in college at Georgia Tech, Northwestern beat my Wildcats beat the Yellow Jackets, and so I've always kind of felt that Iman Shumpert was a little bit overrated. But getting that bias out of the way, he's definitely limited in what he can do. He's in there to defend. He's not a great shooter, and you can see that New York is going with Felton and Kidd in the backcourt anyway, at the end of games. And Jason Kidd was a huge defensive difference at the end. He did a good job, playing the passing lanes and forcing some of those turnovers, getting to the floor. Like he was a big difference in this basketball game. But I definitely agree. I'd love to see more from Shumpert because what he can bring defensively is going to be more important later on in the playoffs and probably later on in the series if Boston goes a little bit bigger with their lineups.
For you trivia geeks out there, you stat geeks, with New York taking a 1-0 lead in this series against Boston, this is actually the first time the Knicks led in the series since 2001 in the first round against the Toronto Raptors. So it's been quite a while for New York. And, this season they've been seeing a lot of milestones, man, the 50-plus winning season, winning the division, and now this. So New York looks pretty good right now. But before we close out this series, we spoke about the Celtics, what they need to do going into Game 2. Phil, what do the Knicks have to do heading into Game 2?
I think the Knicks have to continue to commit themselves defensively and keep the ball moving. I think they found a good balance with Carmelo Anthony kind of taking over when he's ready to take over, but they got to continue to keep other guys involved and have guys scoring points. I mean, you have 4 players in double figures. You got to try and keep that number high and maybe not rely on Melo to go through a big offensive spurt like he did. Right,
well, there you go. Will be in New York, so stay tuned for that. This should be another great game between these two rivals. All right, let's go and shift back to the Western Conference, where the Golden State Warriors visited the Denver Nuggets, and true to form, the Nuggets held form at home. They just do not lose in Denver. Final score in Denver is 97-95 off a game-winning layup by Andre Miller. And Phil, is it just me or the Nuggets really need to chill out? They didn't win the NBA championship. They need to calm down a little bit. It was just game 1.
In some ways, I don't mind their kind of rambunctiousness because this is a relatively young group. Brewer's been around for a while. He's actually won a championship with the Mavericks. Andre Iguodala's been around. Andre Miller's been around since the beginning of time. But this is still a young, excitable group, and I think it's part of their personality. And I really believe in the playoffs. Part of you wants to act like you've been there before, and that you're expecting greatness. But if that's not your identity, I don't think you can change your identity. Just because it's the playoffs.
Right. Yeah. This was a phenomenal game. If you missed it, this, in my opinion, I think this was the best game of opening day. Yeah, this was a really exciting game. But if you're Golden State, are you concerned that you still lost this game, knowing that Denver did not have Kenneth Faried and obviously did not going to have Danilo Gallinari?
I mean, I'm definitely concerned if I'm Golden State that this is the one that got away, because as we said in the last podcast, Denver is nearly unbeatable at home. And so when you have a chance to win a game like this on the road, and I believe Golden State had the lead for a good chunk of not for a good chunk of that fourth quarter, but they were in the lead in the third, heading into the third quarter, and for a lot of the third quarter, and kind of let it slip late in that third quarter, and we're playing catch up. They do play catch up, and then this play happens. I think Golden State has to feel like they let it slip by them a little bit, and that's they got to get over that obviously very, very quickly now.
Right. And if you dig deeper into the stat sheet here, as Phil was talking about, that the Warriors had a chance to beat Denver in a place where they're nearly unbeatable. Again, you look back, I mean, they had the lead with 35 seconds left thanks to a Stephen Curry three-pointer that put them up.
That was actually to tie it.
Oh, that was a tie. I'm sorry. Okay, well, regardless, they still had a shot. They could take it in overtime or something. There was still enough time for them to legitimately win it. But you also look more. The Warriors, they had 55 rebounds, and they were the most against Denver in a playoff game. So, there were the pieces falling there for them. As Denver had a brain collapse, trying to allowing. And I know you and I talked about this before the recording.
Yeah.
You said you felt that the Denver defense did enough on Stephen Curry to get him away from the 3-point line. He still nailed it. I said they didn't do enough. I said you should have done at least a double team. You give up the two, but regardless, it happened. So there are some silver lining coming out of this loss if you're Golden State. However, what about the loss or the injury of David Lee?
I mean, I think that could be a big loss for them. As you said, they had the big rebounding advantage, 55-45, 13 offensive rebounds. David Lee only has 2 of those, but he has 14 total rebounds to go along with Andrew Bogut. And really, it felt like Andrew Bogut was a huge difference in this game. He had 4 blocks, just really changed the game defensively, and he is such an X factor, because you really don't know what you're ever going to get from Andrew Bogut. And so having David Lee back there just providing some consistency and providing another big body to keep a guy like Ty Lawson out of the paint. Who's to say that a veteran like David Lee would have been able to shift over and cut off Andre Miller and force him to pass the ball or force him into a more difficult shot on that game winner and give you a chance to win it in overtime.
Right. And again, if you did not catch the game, David Lee banged into JaVale McGee, and he landed on his right hip. It looks like he was clearly in pain. He walked off the court. He gathered himself. He shot both free throws, but he just did not return back, and he was taken in for X-rays.
Yes, and I believe ESPN reported at this point that they think it's just a strain, which is good, a hip flexor strain, I believe, which is
that's like I guess that's the it could be worse. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes.
But if I'm Denver, I want to talk a little bit more about Denver before we shift gears to the final series of day one. You know what? I was actually very impressed by JaVale McGee. I know he gets a lot of slack in the NBA for being like kind of a dummy, I guess, for lack of a better word. He's always a butt of a joke. But you know what? I mean, he brought the energy. He brought the toughness. I mean, we saw what he did to Andrew Bogut, just totally annihilated him on a dunk, and go out to crossoverchronicles.com to see the video of it. And I think that really sparked Denver. I like what he did. I like that aggressiveness. I like that his athleticism is just off the charts. And if this guy can just get it together more mentally, I think he can be a phenomenal player in this league, and he can be an all-star almost every single season.
Yeah. I mean, he's got that kind of athleticism. I mean, he's just still so raw. And I know he's trying to develop his skills. He worked with Hakeem Olajuwon this summer. He's still just so raw, and then he does kind of those kind of boneheaded plays that gets him on Shaqtin' the Fool. And so
Right.
you have to, with him, I think George Karl has taken the right approach. You bring him off the bench for kind of a limited role. You're not relying on him to get you a lot of points. You're relying on him for energy, which is what he's good at this point. And he has shown tremendous growth this year. He still gets ragged on, and I think that's kind of part of his personality too, that he's kind of embraced it. And that's what's made him more effective. And so he'll have games like he did tonight, and he'll, probably in this series he'll have a game that, you're just sitting there like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah, exactly. Just shift back to the Golden State Warriors, and again, you're looking at who did what in this series. Is it too much to ask for Harrison Barnes maybe to step up a little bit more?
I mean, he's a rookie. You got to remember that. You want him to. Yeah, you need him to. You probably need him if you want to win the series to provide a little bit more. But you also have to remember he's a rookie, and this is just like it's Stephen Curry's first playoff. It's his first playoff as well, and you could definitely. I could definitely sense an experience gap between the Warriors and Nuggets, especially on the coaching front, and you could see it kind of with how the players are executing. When Andre Miller hit that shot with about a second and a half left in the game, Golden State was out of timeouts because they had to spend them, because they couldn't execute. Because Denver was sitting on plays that Golden State's pet plays, and so all these guys are going to have to learn how to adjust. And does Barnes need to provide more? Yeah, if they want to win the series.
Maybe the real focus should be, does Jack need to stop jacking up every freaking shot that he gets? You look at his line.
Did not shoot the ball well tonight.
No, 3 for 12, 0 for 5 from downtown. Though he did facilitate a lot, which is a credit to him. 10 assists, but my goodness, 3 turnovers, 3 for 12 again from the field, 0 for 5 from long distance. Wow. I always liked Jack. I always liked his game. I thought he was one of those more steady, reliable guys coming off your bench. And though like I said, he did finish with a double-double, technically 10 points, 10 assists. But man, he needs to really learn how to do something called shot selection.
He's got to be more efficient for sure.
Yeah.
But he helps facilitate Stephen Curry.
But
you got to have him out there, and plus he's the veteran on this team. At least from the guards, and he's supposed to help settle everybody down. And tonight he didn't do that. I mean, he failed at that part of his role.
He didn't do it maybe offensively, but did he facilitate? Yeah, I mean, look at his line, 10 assists, but those little other things that may have, that had it been avoided, may have helped Warriors to pull out a win out in Denver. 3 turnovers is not going to cut it. 3 for 12 from the field is not going to cut it. If your shot's not on, then, I know the old adage is keep on shooting until you find your rhythm. But this is the playoffs, and, facilitate. And he did do that with 10 assists, but the shot selection could be a little bit better. So, hopefully Jack will fix that heading into game 2. Again, Denver Nuggets won game 1, 97-95 in Denver. They eke it. It's just amazing. I mean, look at Golden State in that fourth quarter, 31 points scored. So I mean, the Warriors, they clearly go into game 2 with, I guess, their chin up. They blew the defensively for the layup that they allowed Denver to have to ice the game. But I'm not too down on myself right now. Just a little bit more mental focus. I think Warriors might escape Denver 1-1.
That would be something if they could. I am curious to see how they react to.
But is Fareed coming back in game 2?
You know what? It didn't seem very clear what was going on with Farid. He could be back, and if he's back and Lee's gone, I think that the series completely shifts heavily in favor of Denver.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right. Before we put a wrap on this podcast, episode 3 of the Crossover Chronicles podcast here, let's go ahead and close out with the final game of day 1 with LA Clippers hosting the Memphis Grizzlies. I guess the rematch, if you will, from last year's playoff series, a thrilling playoff series, a 7-game series. You had a tremendous comeback by the Clippers. In one of the games, I think they're down like 20 plus points. These two teams, perhaps a budding rivalry, maybe, before we dive into this again, the final score from LA, the Clippers did win big, 112-91. They're up 1-0 in the series. And it's funny though, because during this game, Phil and I were talking, and I said, why do I expect something physical, a fight? Something's going to happen in this series. And we saw, starting, at least, glimpses of it tonight, didn't we, Phil?
We definitely did. Zach Randolph and Blake Griffin are fighting for every inch. It is trench warfare, in the paint between these two. And they're grabbing and holding and standing over the other one to make sure they don't get up. I mean, they're pulling every dirty trick they can find to help.
This was a weird game for me, and I'll tell you why. I never felt that Memphis was completely out, maybe until the waning moments of the game. Yes, maybe the Clippers were holding like a double-digit lead, but Memphis just looked like they were not going to give up, and they were still scrappy. It wasn't until the end of the game where the Clippers started to pull away from Memphis. But during this game, whether they be up 10 points, whether they be up 13 points, or whether it was very close, this Memphis team, I don't think they're going to go down. And yes, they may have lost pretty bad tonight, but you know what? If I'm the Clippers, I still come out with that same focus, that same intensity. Because if you give an inch to this Grizzlies team, I think they're going to just pound you.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going to be an intense physical series. There's no doubt about that. And if the Clippers let up even just a little bit, they're going to. If the Clippers let up just a little bit, they're going to get beat. I think that's just the nature of playoff basketball. And the Grizzlies are trying to draw them in a little bit and try and maybe goad them a little bit. And to the Clippers' credit, for the most part, they kept their wits.
Yeah. They really did. Memphis was called for 29 fouls in this game, so they were really trying to, provoke the young Clippers here. But let's talk about what really stood out for me here, and that was the guard play for the Clippers. You had Chauncey Billups, who coming off a pretty bad injury, he scores 14 points. You got Caron Butler, Jamal Crawford, they scored 13 points apiece. You got Chris Paul, who just steadied this team. He was just doing it on both ends of the court. Is it going to really come down maybe, Phil, to guard play in this series versus the big man play?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking that as I was watching this game, because I know in the previous podcast we had said that this game's going to be one in the paint, who can, whether they can stop Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph, or whether DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin would win that. But this game was about the guards. Chris Paul was, he looked like Chris Paul, and played a Chris Paul game. Eric Bledsoe was just bursting with energy. I mean, it was fantastic.
What was he? Was he ever? Yeah.
I mean, 15 points, made all 7 of his shots. I mean, he was all over the place. And even a guy like Matt Barnes and Lamar Odom did some really scrappy things that from a guard or forward position that you gotta have. And so, it was definitely more about the guards tonight, because Memphis's guards couldn't buy a bucket, couldn't create for their big men.
Well, if it does come down to guard play, then Memphis is in trouble, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely. Their guards are not anywhere near as good as the Clippers, and that's why they have to slow the game down.
Right, yeah. But again, let's go and fast forward into the fourth quarter now. Mm-hmm. The Grizzlies, they were still in the game. They closed in as close as 1 point early in the fourth quarter. and by a 3-pointer by Keon Dooling. But what really stood out for me is, again, maybe the maturity level of this young Clippers team is started to show in the postseason, because after the Grizzlies closed within 1 point in the fourth, the Clippers answered with a 15-3 run. I mean, if you're Vinny Negro, you're probably like, oh, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it was impressive to see the Clippers kind of hold on to that one, because the whole game kind of felt like the Clippers were up by more than they actually were. And like you said, if Memphis hit the right notes, they could have come back and stolen this game. And the Clippers they got beaten fast break points, if I'm not mistaken, but they found a way to beat Memphis at their own game. And that's something you've got to be able to do in the playoffs, is when things aren't going right, you've got to find a way to win.
Right. And again, as Phil mentioned, this is a game where it was close, but it felt like Clippers were up big or something. Because if you dig deeper in the stats, Memphis, they actually owned a 48-46 edge scoring in the paint. Okay?
Yeah.
But that's what it was keeping them in the game. And I was watching the game, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is where the big man difference is going to be. But then, flip the script, the Clippers, they dominated in second chance points, 25-5 up on the Grizzlies. And they actually out-rebounded the bigger and maybe more skilled big man of Memphis, 47-23. I'm actually shocked more by that stat.
That number is really, really shocking. I don't have the fast break points were 11-10 in Memphis's favor. It seemed like for most of the game, the Clippers were struggling to get out on the break, and so Los Angeles was playing a half-court game against Memphis, and that's something you're not supposed to do, especially for a Clippers team that gets so much energy from going out on the break and making highlight plays. And so the Clippers showed a lot of growth tonight, and if they can copy this performance throughout the rest of the series, they'll win games. They'll be a dangerous team.
Right, exactly. And we're looking at the Grizzlies final box here now. Yes, Zach Randolph may have scored his points, 13 points to finish the game. Gasol may have gotten his points, 16 points to finish out game one. However, you look at the rebounding, though. That's where I'm still shocked. For the game, Gasol had 2.
Yeah,
For the game, Randolph had 4. This is usually you don't see that from this tandem. Either one of them will have double-digit rebound.
Neither of them had an offensive rebound.
Right. Yeah. So was this something that maybe the Clippers did?
Yeah, it definitely seemed like there was a focus from the Clippers to gang rebound. If you look at the Clippers box score, on the other hand, you see no one had more than 10 rebounds. Jordan was the high with 8, Griffin had 7, and those are the 2 guys you expect to get most of the rebounds, but everyone else chipped in and made sure that they secured the glass, and that's a good thing. If the Clippers can do that and focus on limiting Memphis' second chance opportunities, and if they can continue to execute in a half court, then this series could be a lot more lopsided than we think.
Yeah. This is this was a kind of an intriguing matchup going into game one, because again, of their history last year, maybe a little bit of animosity that we saw in the series they had last year, and of course we saw a little bit of it in game one. But this is if the Clippers do go beyond the first round and go into the second round, credit to them and their maturity level. I think maybe, just maybe, they're finally starting to get it, what it takes to play in the playoffs. They got embarrassed last year by the Spurs getting swept in the playoffs and anything. And if they do go beyond the second round, or more so, I think a little bit. I think if you're Vinny Negro, you're okay with it, because I don't know. I got a feeling that maybe, just maybe, next season he might be on the hot seat if they don't produce.
He might be on the hot seat this year. I mean, they mentioned it during the broadcast. He's a coaching free agent this summer. So if Phil, for instance, not saying that this is going to happen, but Phil Jackson said, I'm interested in coaching again. What would stop him from wanting to go back to LA's other team?
Right. I mean, and we all know that Phil Jackson is an opportunist. And you got the pieces there.
Yeah.
You have Blake Griffin, you have Jordan, you have Chris Paul, you have Chauncey Billups, you have Jamal Crawford, you have Caron Butler, you have Eric Bledsoe. You got some really great pieces there. So Del Negro is going to really have to show that he can coach this team to maybe beyond the second round, and maybe put away teams early in the series that he's about to face. But heading into Game 2, Phil, do you think Grizzlies are out of it still?
Oh, no.
After Game 1?
No, not by any stretch. Memphis is a good team. They'll adjust. They've been through battles before.
Okay, so what is your first adjustment if you're Memphis?
My first adjustment is finding a way to spring my guards loose and get them going to the basket. I think one of the problems that the Grizzlies had today was they weren't able to get into the paint and make the defense shift. The only things they could do were post-ups. And I think Griffin and Jordan did a very good job pushing Randolph and Gasol off their spots. And so they were setting up further away from the basket than they wanted to. And so Memphis has got to find a way to get probably their guards into the paint more, and make sure their centers are where they need to be.
It's scary though if you're Memphis though. When they had their starting unit out there, when the Clippers had their starting unit out on the court, each and every single player is up on the plus side and you're plus minus.
Yeah.
That is scary. Griffin is plus 15.
They're all plus 10 at least.
Yeah. They're all at plus 10 or more. And you look on the other side of the Memphis side, they're all in the negative. They're all minus. Yeah. So something needs to be fixed. I don't know.
They've got to play better. The guards have got to make shots. They've got to force the Clippers to go out to the 3-point line and defend.
And that's the case that I'm looking squarely at Mike Conley.
Yeah, you have to. You definitely have to. And to some extent, Tony Allen, although he's not much of an offensive player, Conley's got to create more for this team.
Yeah. Do you throw a guy out there like Austin Day? He is long, he's lanky. He might be able to disrupt maybe some of the guard penetration from the Clippers.
I mean, but he doesn't provide you much offensively. And I think that's the bigger issue for the Grizzlies.
But it's not like Jordan. It's not like Jordan on the opposite side gives you much offensively.
Yeah, but I mean they have Chris Paul.
Yeah, well that's true. All right. Well, again, the Clippers pull out the win in LA, 112-91, to take a 1-0 lead in their opening round series against the Grizzlies. The series will still stay in Los Angeles for Game 2 before shifting out to Memphis. But at the end of the day, Phil, after day one of the opening night, the NBA playoffs, what is your one big takeaway from all 4 games, or just one big takeaway from the 4 games that you saw?
My one big takeaway is that Andre Miller will still be winning games at the YMCA when he is 123.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, my big takeaway from this opening day of the NBA playoffs is that we might start seeing maybe a coming out party for Stephen Curry. Who knows? That'd be good. That'd be good. He definitely produced tonight. Yesterday. By the time I listened to the show yesterday, in a loss to the Warriors, but nonetheless, he was clutch when he needed to be clutch by nailing that 3-pointer. Yes, maybe the team lost, but I like what I saw out of him. He showed poise. He was steady. He was still keeping his hot streak going. And again, nailing a clutch shot under pressure showed me a lot. That maybe we might start seeing him become a bigger player, a bigger star in the league. We'll see. It was just one game. But if he does again in Game 2, that's good news for the Warriors and bad news for the Nuggets. All right. Well, that was your recap of day one of the 2013 NBA playoffs. It was exciting, except for one game. We'll never want to talk about that one again. But until next time, for Phil, I am Jeff Garcia, and we'll see you next time right here on the Crossover Chronicles podcast.